Hello, Phil Hinkle here, back with another tutorial today from proDAD. This time I've got a tutorial for you on Pinnacle Studio 19 with the Mercalli V2 plugin installed. I will say that I've been using Pinnacle Studio for just a little while now. I got a chance to try it out, and I must say, as a professional editor, I am very impressed with the features and usability of this application that is really designed and targeted at hobbyists and consumers. It's very powerful, does a lot of neat things, and I can see myself using it for some simple quick projects down the road in some of my work. So if you're looking for an editing system, give Pinnacle a look. It's very inexpensive, and it just works, and it works well. So I'll be showing you a couple of the features while we're in here, but mostly I'm here to talk about Mercalli today. So let's get started. First up, I've got a clip here a friend sent me of some skydiving footage. You can see it over here in my output monitor. Let me slide that a little bit and make it a little bit bigger for us. You can see it's got some shakes and bumps in it, and let's see if Mercalli can fix that up. First thing I've got to do is go find my filter. There's a couple ways you can do it. We can come over here and click on navigation and click effects, and we'll get all these different effects. And we can come down and find the one for proDAD. There's Mercalli right there. Let me show you a trick I've discovered. If I click on navigation effects and just come down in here to proDAD, I can just click Mercalli right there, and boom, there's my filter. So I'm going to just take that, drag it down on my clip, and our output monitor says we must analyze before we can see what Mercalli does. So let's do it. A couple ways you can do it. You can double click on the clip, and you will get a screen like this, which is your clip in a big screen. You can come up here and open the filter, or if you would like, you can right click onto effect and edit Mercalli 2. I will use different methods depending on what I'm doing. For this one, this will work. Okay, so we've got our clip opened. We're going to click open on our plugin, and we will get the Mercalli version 2 interface. First thing I'm going to do is check further settings. These are the basic, simple. If you want to click OK here, you're probably going to get a pretty good stabilization out of Mercalli. But there's more tweakability in here, and if you want to see it, you click further settings, and the window slides out and gets a little bigger, and you see all these other new features. Let's walk through some of how Mercalli works. First thing we're going to look at is final result, the compare view. For a final result, we can see just our fixed footage, or we can see a horizontal split screen or a vertical split screen. If we select horizontal, it's going to have a line down the screen. In our case, that skydiver is right in the middle, so it might be kind of a good way to compare our before and after footage. Or we could click a vertical split screen, and depending on where they're at in the screen, it'll draw a line along about the middle of your screen, and you'll see one side is fixed and one side is raw. And that way you can compare. Next up is border handling. There's a couple of options under here. There's best border, best stabilization, and fixed border. For 90% of everything I've tried in Mercalli, of all the different versions I've used, best border is going to be your ticket most of the time. So I'm just, for our sake, I'm going to leave it there. Depending on your footage, if you got some weird things going on and you want to try some of these others, one of these may be a little bit better for you, but I'm going to leave it right there on best border. Next is the roll compensation slider. You can see we can change this up and down, and I'm going to put it back to about 50, which is where we started. What the roll compensation does is it tells Mercalli how much to work on the footage that may be rolling back and forth or left and right in your screen. And the higher number you run that up to, the more stable your footage will be, but you'll lose a pixel here and there around the borders because it's got to crop just a little bit more. The good thing about Mercalli is they've gone to great lengths in the programming to make sure we save as many pixels as we can in your footage. So cropping happens, but it's not as drastic as some other applications you may come across for stabilization. Zoom compensation is an interesting feature. What it does is it looks at your footage, and depending on the seriousness of your vibration, it determines how much it's going to have to zoom in or crop, and it does it dynamically. So if you've got some footage that's really bumpy and then really smooth and really bumpy and really smooth, you may actually see, if you select zoom compensation and work with this slider, you may actually see your footage pulsing in and out as it has to crop that little bit more and little less to keep your footage stable. Most of the time I don't really need this because I want my footage to stay exactly how I have it, and I don't want that pulsing in and out, so I seldom have to use it, but I have on occasion. Horizontal tilt compensation is going to determine how much Mercalli has to work on footage along the horizontal axis. And vertical tilt compensation is going to determine how much Mercalli has to work on the vertical axis of your footage. This particular footage I don't think needs these features, but that's how these particular features work. So depending on your footage, you may need to use one of those and push the compensation a little bit higher just to get the stabilization you need. The next option is keep camera dynamic. What this does is by leaving it checked, it tells Mercalli, yes, my camera had movement in it. It's because it was handheld, or it was on a helmet of somebody skydiving, or I'm standing on the sideline filming, a soccer match from my kid. Yes, the camera has some shake and some movement. I don't want to get rid of all of it and make it look sterile. I want it to look organic. I want it to look real, but I want to get all those shakes and jitters out of there. If you turn it off, it's going to try and make your camera more solid and not have any dynamic, natural, organic movement to it. I always like my footage to look like it's a handheld camera, just not as shaky. So I'm going to select keep camera dynamic. Next up is your virtual camera. There are a couple options here: universal camera, glide camera, rock steady camera, alternative camera. Again, in my years of using Mercalli, of all the different versions, universal camera works most of the time for what I need, so I generally leave it right there. I will tell you a story. Recently, I have a friend that sent me some footage from a handheld gimbal with an action cam on it, and it was really smooth and it was really steady, but I noticed there was a little bit of movement up and down. I mean, it absorbed the vibrations and it made the footage smooth, but there was some up and down. There was a little bit of left and right that the gimbal couldn't remove and couldn't fix. I tried his footage on rock steady camera because I got to thinking, he's holding this, it's in his hand, and it's supposed to be a gimbal, so it's supposed to be rock solid like a tripod. Even though it's moving with the gimbal, it should be really smooth, so let's try the rock steady camera. It took all of that little up and down movement, side to side movement, and it was rock solid. I was like, whoa, that's where this option comes in well, and he was very impressed and loved the fact that I'd found a new feature for him in Mercalli. So try that if you got some of that kind of footage, but under most circumstances, your universal camera is going to work. Rolling shutter compensation. If you turn that on, Mercalli's going to go out and fix the rolling shutter. If you know what rolling shutter is, that's if you do a pan left and right real quick with a newer camera with a CMOS sensor, you'll see your fence posts and your light poles, they'll bend left and right as you move the camera. That's because of how the CMOS imager is working. I'm not going to go into the science behind that, but if you know what I'm talking about, you've seen it, click on rolling shutter compensation. It will straighten those things out for you. Pan shot smoothing, that helps compensate for when your camera's panning side to side and maybe it's a little jerky or too fast. It'll smooth that out, make the transitions from left to right a little bit smoother. You can bump your numbers up on that if you want, or move it down. I'm going to leave everything on the default for what we're working on here, but that's how pan shot smoothing works. Avoid border. By checking avoid border and leaving it on, what it's doing is it's making sure that you've always got a full screen of video. If you uncheck avoid border, when it goes and stabilizes your footage, Mercalli is going to move the footage around that little bit that it needs to get that shakeout. Well, you'll see black lines appear on the edges of your screen because it's just taking your full image and moving it. What avoid border does is it allows Mercalli to crop in just that little bit that's needed to make your footage appear on the screen all the time with no black borders around it. This option down here, signalize frames where a higher stabilization could be possible using avoid border. If I check that, it's going to do something else, which I'm actually going to show you in a few minutes in this tutorial, so I'm going to leave that alone and not touch it right now. Video format. I'm using footage from an action cam. Action cams almost exclusively record progressive HD footage, so I'm going to leave it as progressive. If you've got one of the early HD cameras, it will record interlace footage. It's usually top field first, and if you've got an old standard definition camera, it's interlaced, it films bottom field first. So you'll want to use those if you've got some of that kind of footage. For what we got, we're leaving it right here on progressive. Let's click OK. And Mercalli is going to go out and start processing our footage. This is just a little informational screen where you can see what it's doing and how far along it is. You see right here it says 9 frames per second. That's how fast it's processing. So this is a 20-30 second clip, so it's going to take a few minutes to process. Our Mercalli processing is all done and we're back. Let's try and play our footage and see what happens, see what it looks like. It looks pretty good there. Let's stop that, click OK, and here we are back on the Pinnacle Studio timeline. Let's hit the play button. Looking pretty good. I like the outcome. I think we'll keep those settings and try a few other things. Down the timeline, I've got the same clip, but you can see I turned on the horizontal compare. If I open up my plugin, click open, you can see right here I've got horizontal split screen selected. I'm going to cancel out of there, cancel back to my Pinnacle Studio timeline, and when I play this clip, you can see the left is much shakier than the right. You can also notice here we did have to crop in and zoom just a little bit, but overall that's not a whole lot of cropping and zooming was needed by Mercalli to make that footage look that much better. Now, one thing that I want to show you that I have tried on this clip, this is again that same clip, but let me open it up and show you what I've done in Mercalli. I've gone a little bit crazy. Open up our further settings. As you can see, I've got a lot of my stuff turned on. I've got all these features turned on. I've got them cranked up to different levels. I've got the avoid border down a little bit. Got the pan shot smoothing moved up. I got the roll compensation. All of these features are turned on. What I did is I processed the clip with all these features because all of these things are going to make Mercalli have to crop just a tiny bit more to compensate for all these different things that it's got to factor into the processing. So I'm going to click out of here, click cancel, go back to my timeline. I'm going to take this clip that had all that extra processing on it. I'm going to stick it on a layer right on top of my first one on the Pinnacle Studio timeline. And right now you can see I've got it muted. This particular track is muted. I'm going to drag my timeline cursor out. Okay, this, remember, is the same settings I used here. I just have the horizontal split screen done. This particular clip, which you can't see yet, is the one that has all those extra features turned on. So if I unmute that track, you'll see it had to zoom in just that tiniest little bit more to accommodate for all those other features that it had to process. Overall, we didn't have to zoom in that much more to do all that extra processing. So you can see the power of Mercalli and how it can be advantageous to do some of those things and experiment a little bit if you've got footage that needs the help. One other thing I want to try and show you here is another clip that I've got. I have a friend that gave me some footage from one of his ski trips at a ski resort, and I did some processing on it with Mercalli version 2 in Pinnacle Studio, and as you can see, we've got a white border around it. Let me show you what that is a result of. If you remember when we were working earlier, we had the option signalize frames where a higher stabilization could be possible using a void border. This time I've checked that, and when I play my footage, you will see there's a white frame most of the time, but every now and then a red frame will flash. I'm not sure if you can see it because it's really quick on the video that you're watching because the screen capture software doesn't capture quite every frame of my screen. But what I will do is I will find a red frame. I can use either my back one frame arrow or forward one frame arrow to find the frame. There's one right there. Before I go into Mercalli and show you how to fix this, I'm going to cancel out. I'm going to come and I'm actually going to make a copy of this clip. Then I'm going to move my timeline cursor down the timeline in Pinnacle Studio and paste it back in. Now I'm going to only work on this one because this one has already been processed. I'm going to process this with some different settings, and then I'm going to stack them again like I did before so we can compare them against each other. So let's open our clip. This time I'm going to go back into my plugin. Now I need to find that frame again. There they are. I'm going to use my arrow keys this time to find the red frame. There's one right there. Okay, we're going to work and see if we can get rid of that red frame. Going to open up my plugin. And this time on avoid border, instead of leaving it at 40, I'm going to ramp that up to, say, 65. That sounds like a good number. And I'm going to process the footage. When we're done, I'm hoping that red border is going to be gone, and then we're going to save it back to our timeline and compare the 40% avoid border with the 65% avoid border. And it's just finishing up. Let's see how it fixed it. Yes, same frame. My red border is now white. Okay, I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to take this clip on my Pinnacle Studio timeline, and I'm going to slide it over the other one. Back here on my track header, it is still muted, which means I can't see that video track, but I can see the one below it. So what I'm going to do, see this tree right here in the corner? I'm going to arrow through my footage. Actually, let's drag it. It's probably easier to do it this way to get in the ballpark. Oh, that poor guy just fell down. That was funny. We got him on video. Okay, I'm going to set it right here. Now notice we've still got a red frame there. That's because at this point in our footage, the footage was still had enough of a jar in it that the avoid border changes we made weren't quite enough to get rid of this red frame, but it did get rid of the previous one. Maybe I decide it's okay, I'll just keep that because I don't want to compromise my video anymore. Right now that tree trunk has disappeared or barely touched the edge of my frame. Remember, this is on the 40% avoid border setting. Let's turn on this 65% avoid border setting. Alright, you can see very minimal amount of cropping has happened on this clip. You can still see a lot of the branches, but that tree trunk has gone a little farther off screen. You can also look at this ski lift pole over here and see the amount of cropping that was needed. It's a very small amount, so we didn't lose a whole lot of our video. We got a little bit better stabilization on this particular clip, but we didn't sacrifice a whole lot of pixels, so we still got some pretty good footage to work with here. I'm going to mute that track back because there's one other thing I want to show you on this 40% avoid border clip. I'm going to put it back to the beginning. I'm going to play it. Oops, I'm hearing sound in my earphones. I'm going to mute the sound on this particular track. Remember, I muted the video, but I'm still pulling the sound in on that track. So I'm going to mute that because you don't need to hear that sound coming through my headphones out to my microphone. So I'm going to play my clip now and look at the footage. You can see it's a little steadier, but we still got this wobble and this skewing going on. What's happening there, I'm going to play that again, is that's artifacts of the CMOS sensor. Those are things that Mercalli version 2 just can't fix. There's very few software applications on the market that can take care of that wobble and that vibration and that CMOS problem. If you're familiar again with CMOS, you understand what's going on there. Mercalli V2 SAL Plus from proDAD does an amazing job of actually fixing those kind of CMOS artifacts. It removes the jello, it removes the wobble, and makes your footage much, much better. Don't ask me how they do it. If you've got some footage that needs a little extra help beyond what Mercalli V2 can do as a plugin here in Pinnacle Studio, you may want to check out Mercalli V2 SAL Plus on the proDAD website, and you can download a trial and purchase it right there as well. Alright, that is pretty much it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something. I hope you had a good time. I certainly did. Get out there and shoot some footage, and don't worry so much if the footage is perfect, because with Mercalli V2 plugged into Pinnacle Studio, you've got a powerful little suite of products that are going to help your footage get even better than what you shot it at. Thanks. Until the next tutorial, you have a great day.